Hello, Paul, and great to have you on board today. Now, we've spoken before, which has been fantastic, and I just have so much that I want to discuss with you. So, what I would like to say is you've been doing M&As for, well, more than a decade, what, 15 years or so now. So, you have everything sorted, I expect, and know all the answers. So, what I'd like to do is to get started. And I've got a little intro pack up the front here for you so people will know who you are. But the thing that really surprises me is that you're a people person as well. And you've got a business, the What's Next guy. So tell us about that, the What Next guy.
Yeah, so that's a nickname that actually another advisor had given to me. And it came about because I asked him, we were asking each other, like, how do you refer to me when you're talking to your clients? He goes, oh, you're easy. You're the what's next guy. I said, the what? He says, the what's next. You help business owners figure out what's next for their business and what's next for their life. And I said, there's a lot of truth to that statement.
Hmm.
You're right, I did start a while ago. And before I say much further, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. But
Correct.
to answer that is when I first got started, so I had sold a business in 2008. I was very lucky. I got my money in July of that year before we all know what happened in the fall, the storm,
Hmm.
as it were. And I really was asking myself that question. See, what's next for me? What should I do? Should I start another business? Should I just go get a job? Whatever. And as often as the case, people started asking me for advice. So I kind of became a consultant by accident. And then I met a gentleman. He said, well, I help people figure that out, what's next. And we basically pulled together a consulting practice. You might, along the lines of exit planning, but much more in lines with what are your goals, what's important to you, how do you get there, what would it take to get there? That's on a coaching process. We were together for a number of years doing that, and then I eventually morphed over to just doing transactions. I still do a little bit of that coaching under another brand, but today, I'm really spending my time with a firm I recently joined, and we've done close to 500 transactions collectively, the dozen of
Wow.
us. And so, people, a little joke I like to say is that, what kind of businesses do you sell? I said, oh, they're tech businesses, high tech, no tech, low tech. What do you got? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the world of my world perspective of M&A.
Well, funny you should say that last bit because I was over in the US and I was listening to Adam Coffey speak. And people ask me all the time, oh, so what industries do you do this in? And frankly, I'm agnostic. It doesn't matter. The process is the same, the issues are the same. There might be a little tweak here and there just for that particular business or that particular industry, but the basic process is the same. And it was great to be in a room and have Adam Coffey up on stage and say exactly the same thing. Finally, people get it. It doesn't matter. If you
Yeah,
know what you're doing, it doesn't matter what industry. So I love
yep.
that you said that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Feel free to steal it.
I've been stealing that for 20 years and people just
Yeah.
don't get it. So every time I hear someone say it, excellent, reinforce it, please. But there was one thing that I think you are going to be able to help with a great deal. And that is when people go in, 500 deals, that's reverberating around. People that are looking at this now, how many deals have you done? One, two, five? 500 here from Paul. Thank you. And his business. So get a little perspective here. Now, the thing that I wanted to really ask you about was you go into a business, you're meeting the founder, you're meeting the owner of the business for the first time. They've had 10 people through previously say, "Oh, I want to buy your business and I'm going to give you this amount of money and we're going to change the name and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to make this better and oh, it's going to be shiny and new." Okay, how am I going, Paul? Am I going to get this business or not?
If that's your pitch, don't let the door hit you on the behind on the way out.
Damn it. So what am I doing wrong here?
Well, one of the things I suggest to people is if you're not familiar with exit planning, learn it. You don't have to be formally trained in it. But one of the things you really gather from that, and in many ways, it's also sales 101, but exit planning 101, which should be in conjunction with M&A, is what are the goals of the business owner? And one of the questions that have sort of evolved over the years, and I try to ask this very early in the conversations, before I'm even engaged, is, I ask people, I said, owners to take out a sheet of paper, and
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to write down a question. And you won't answer it with me, but it's important you do. So let's
So you're
get a
writing down the
paper.
question, not the answer.
Yeah. I said, what I
Okay.
want you to do is think about and answer this question for yourself. By selling my business, what goals can I
Hmm.
accomplish? Right? By selling my business, what goals can I accomplish? And then under that question, okay, write 3 columns. Column 1 is personal goals. Column 2, financial goals. Column 3, business goals. It doesn't exactly matter which order you do it in, but you
Yeah.
really should address it. And it's really even more important if you're not the 100% owner, because you have one or two or more partners who also need to answer those questions. And I recently ran this exercise with somebody, and he was one of 4 siblings, all late 60s, early 70s. And he said, no one's ever asked me to run that exercise before. And I said, because most people like me are just trying to get you to sign the engagement letter so we can get some money.
Yes.
And he laughed. He goes, yeah, that's true. And I said, but here's the thing you'll learn. Take that sheet of paper, make 3 copies, hand one to each of your siblings, and then go home separately and spend some time answering the question. And then get together and read your answers aloud to each other. Because I guarantee you, brother number 1 is going to say something that you haven't heard, and brother 2 is going to say something the two of you hadn't, you know what I mean? You'll
Hmm.
learn, because if each of you has slightly different goals, which is often the case, those will ultimately rear their ugly head at the worst possible time as you're going through the transaction.
I see. Yes. Okay. So what you're doing is you're preempting the issues before they even arrive, before you even get the contract.
Exactly. I want to know what I'm walking into. I like to say, I'm not old, but I'm definitely older. So I just don't have time to waste talking to somebody, signing an engagement with somebody, getting a retainer, which is, really 5% of my potential income on deal, right? That isn't going to happen. Is it going to cause stress and aggravation for my client, the buyer, and me? It's like life is just too damn short. So let's find out what the potential conflicts are, the conflicting goals maybe. Now, obviously, if there's one
Hmm.
owner, it's his goals. But I also joke and I'm like, if you got a spouse, if you got kids, they have goals too. They just haven't gotten around to sharing them with you.
I didn't want to interrupt, but you've just covered something that I've been biting my tongue trying to get into this conversation. And that is that sheet of paper when they take it home. Are they the only ones filling that sheet of paper out?
It's a
What
great
about
question.
the
Yes.
partner?
Absolutely. That spouse or partner, has goals, and again, this is what you learn when you go through exit planning and coaching. You're talking when you're really talking to the owner all about goals, not about the transaction, which is what exit planning process is about. That's when all this other stuff comes out, and that's goals. Another part is, I mean, fears, or some people don't like to use fears, like, what are your concerns? Same thing, right?
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, and when you really start digging into that, you get to say, well, I'm afraid that, you know, I won't have anything to do after I leave, right? I'm afraid that I might not be treated well during the process. I'm afraid they'll ask me to stay on past the 24-month contract. I'm afraid. There's all of these
Mm.
things. So they may say, I'm concerned if they don't like to use the word fear. I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about it. Great. Let's write them all down. Let's talk about that. Right. And again, not a lot of people in finance come from, debits and credits and balance sheets and P&L. So that the touchy-feely stuff. But I got to tell you that the touchy-feely, the empathy, the psychology, that's 90% of a transaction.
I get it, Paul. And you'd think on a podcast like M&A Profits, Lessons from the Trenches, that this podcast would be all about finance people, numbers, technology, systems, processes, applications. Most of my guests are all about the people. They're all about personnel and touchy-feely stuff. So I hope the people that are watching this are getting it. And right now, click rewind, go back to that sheet of paper that Paul was talking about, and watch that again. Because I guarantee you missed it. And you need to start doing it right now.
Here, here, Craig. And as another lawyer told me long, long time ago, he says, Paul, when it comes to M&A, he says the soft issues are the hardest issues.
Yeah. Uh, I've taken a policy this year, Paul, of not participating in the political correctness. That's been my
Yeah.
strategy for this year. Uh, but we do have limits, okay? We don't mention lawyers. We've got to have standards, okay?
Some of my best friends are lawyers.
And my goddaughter is as well. So hopefully she won't be watching this episode. Okay. So now we've walked in the door, we've got them to fill out a sheet of paper. We understand that this is a people process. How long from when you first approach them to actually concede, or do they concede that they are going to sell? What's the time frame there?
So from I call it the emotional leap, right? Like, okay, I'm ready to sign an engagement. My experience is, it's not the first conversation. It can be two or three. In fact, my network, I've got a pretty vast network. They've learned from me about what potentially good clients. So a lot of times the prospect for me is a client of someone else, one of those. And that lawyer, she's telling the client, well, these are things you need to think about. And, they're kind of warming them up before they get to me. So I have found that, if there's really a fit in the first meeting, it usually doesn't take too much longer. And if it's not a good fit, which is, it's been nice talking to you, wish you well, can I refer to
Mm,
somebody else?
yeah.
But there are other times when, that it can take a year or more. It can take, I've actually got one, I'm going to call it lead for 3 years. There's a personal referral through somebody, excuse me, a referral of somebody who went to middle school, what we call middle school here in the States with somebody. Guy wants to sell his business. And then as I started talking to him and his partner, I realized, oh, the two of you own three businesses and you've kind of done this with the financials and people and everything. And so I said, well,
Oh,
I know
yuck.
he wants to sell it. You over here are not sure you want to sell, but I have to tell you, based on what you've done in the bit with the business and how you're operating the three businesses, a buyer is most likely going to buy it all because it's the only way they can add up A plus B plus C. And they were looking like, what? What did we do to ourselves? Right? as now as it happened, they've actually made some acquisitions. I'm not a buy side guy, I do a sell side. And I reached out to them recently because we may potentially have an acquisition and like, yeah, we could take a look at that. And we haven't forgotten about selling someday. And I went back to my contact who introduced me, and he said, yeah, my guy would still like to sell, but he can't do it until the other guy says, let's do it. So,
Well, that brings up a really good point as well. When should people start to think about selling? Because obviously those people, not to put it too blunt, but remember, we're not doing political correctness, they've screwed up their finances and they've got a mismatch that is just untangleable by the buyer at this stage. So, how long should people start to plan ahead before they actually sell?
when ideally, I would tell people ideally, if you can be a few years out, then
Hmm.
that gives you time to figure out the legal issues, the estate planning issues. In fact, if most financials need to be um, reviewed in some level, clarified in some level. As I like to say, yeah, pull out the Teslas and the yachts and the 14 gas cards and all the other you know what. Um, and then you've got 3 years of what we call clean financials, right? You actually make a money, you actually have show a real profit on which you have to pay taxes, but then you don't have to have as much of the adjustments, normalizations, and stuff. You're nodding your head, right? We all know this. So that's
A lot of
ideally,
people
right?
don't know it, do they? They
Yeah.
don't know it. And
Oh,
sorry for cutting you off there,
no.
but the issue is that their finances are so messed up and they're focused on tax reduction that they've shot themselves in the foot already. They now want to sell. They've just done their taxes on the Monday, and on the Friday they decide, okay, I'm going to go out and find someone to sell my business for me.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
no, that's just not the way it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I had a buyer give me this great advice one time. And he said, Paul, I appreciate, you deal, you have, what is it? You handle the cards as they're dealt to you, right? And I'm going, yeah, this is kind of where it is. And he said, here's the challenge. When you've got somebody who our tax agency here is called the IRS. If you have somebody who's willing to submit a tax form where they're essentially kind of lying to the IRS about, personal stuff, it's a little gray area or sometimes not so gray area. He said, as a buyer, as soon as I see that stuff that's really, over the edge, I start saying to myself, now here's an owner who's been lying to the IRS for God only knows how many years. What else is he lying to me about his business? Therefore, I am going to assume everything I'm shown about this person's business is not the truth until I prove it as the truth. Think about that. And you really have put yourself on the back foot as someone out there in the market trying to sell your business. You've also, if you are not engaged with an advisor like me, you're kind of interviewing. Well, you're also being interviewed by the advisor.
Mm. I heard a saying recently from a guy called JT Fox, and he made a statement: how people do one thing is how they do everything.
Yes.
And you've just said exactly the same thing there. You really have. If they've lied there, then they've lied further on. Which brings me to another point: my four rules. Let me tell you my four rules if I have not done so already. First rule, tell me what you can do. Second rule, tell me what you can't do. And that's okay. If you can't do it, there's someone out there that can. Just need to know. That's fine. Rule number three, don't lie to me or my customer. And rule number four, don't ignore me or my customer.
Yes. Excellent.
And
Yep.
when I go into a business with someone or into a transaction with someone of any kind, I go through my four rules. There's no reason not to be able to agree with those four rules as far as I'm concerned. And if there's a breach of those, then sorry, there's no way back because of this new saying that I've heard recently. How someone does one thing is how they do everything.
Yeah, that's
They
so
just
great.
can't be trusted from that point on.
I love that there's a financial advisor I know, and as you know, people in the finance industry have a well deserved reputation for not necessarily being trusted. So he said, whenever somebody tells me that they're very honest and very trustworthy, I immediately assume they're not. Because here's the deal: you're either honest and trustworthy, or you're not. Because there's no sort of trustworthy.
Well, I have a meeting with someone, and I'm just looking down at my calendar now, in 7.5 hours. And I met him earlier this week. Young guy. And I wouldn't normally go and meet this person. But anyway, he came through, and I'm not someone to say no. Everybody's got their story, everybody's got their value. You just need to take the time to understand what that is. So,
Yeah,
practice what I preach. I met up with the guy, and within the first 4 minutes, he said, I'm not going to lie to you.
great.
And I said, no, 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 no. I
Thanks for the
said,
favor.
I said, as soon as you say that to me, I said, my first thought is everything else you've told me is a lie. That this is the only truth that you've told me so far. And I went through this with him, and he said, I don't get it.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we had a conversation. I said, well, look, I said, let's agree that you tell me the truth from now on.
right.
I said, we both know at the bottom right hand corner, there is a little red button that says end. I said, we're both here in agreement that we want to participate in this conversation and we want to work together. So he said it again in the conversation. And I quickly clicked the end button to the conversation and hung up on him. And I sent a message to him in this is off topic, but anyway, it is how you deal with people. So I sent him a message, call me back immediately. And I went back into the thing. He said, oh, sorry, we got disconnected. I don't know what happened. I said, well, it's easy. I hung up on you. I said, because you were uncoachable. You did not listen to what I said. And you said that same thing again. I'm not going to lie to you. And I said, I already told you that that was intolerable by me because that means everything else is a lie.
What do you think a buyer's going to think?
Exactly. And that's why I tell this story. But I did note, remember I said I've got a meeting with him in 7.5 hours?
Yes,
He booked that meeting.
good.
So
Well,
though,
let's hope he doesn't use that phrase again.
oh, I'm sure he will not.
To be fair, and again, admit perhaps in my country, people will say, can I be honest? And what I think they're really saying is, can I be direct? Can I be frank? As opposed to, can I say it in a nice way than I should? And I've started to, because I caught myself, and I just say, to be honest, but just say, to be direct,
Yep.
fill in the blank. And then people, and
I
sometimes it's a
appreciate
little
that.
frank, it's a little
Yep.
blunt, but it's like, well, can I be direct?
Mm.
No, or that's not going to work, or
Oh,
whatever. But if they, can I be honest? No, I'm like, well, then you get into what that you just said, right? So for those
uh,
listening, switch, can I be honest? Should, whatever, to be, can I be direct, or I've got to be direct with you now, as opposed to being, nice and getting there.
but the point of this is language is everything when you're dealing with a prospect, when you're dealing with a business owner. If you screw up that language in a way that doesn't come across well, then the deal's done. Now, I was talking with someone the other day and they said, oh, you come into the business, you've got to dress appropriately and go into the business. And I said, yeah. I said, I'm not going to go into a plumbing business dressed like this, am I?
No,
I said,
no.
that's just not going to
I'm
work.
overdressed to go to the plumber.
You've got to be relatable and they have to trust you totally. And they're just looking for a bit of doubt to say no. You've got to give them no reason to say no.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that was a very long-winded way to get to that last statement, I think.
yeah, no, and it's the unfortunate reality. Many people in finance, have a well-earned reputation not to be trusted advisors, to be distrusted advisors or mistrusted advisors, and we have to fight like hell to become trusted advisors. And even for those of us, I would say, some financial professionals obviously are managing money, right? So these really long-term relationships. M&A folks like you and I. Here's what our relationships are like with most of our clients, our sell side clients. They're short, intense, and terminal because we're selling their company and they're riding off into the sunset. So it's like, you better find a way to be direct. You better find a way to build trust really fast because you got a short window of knowing somebody and selling their company.
Well, I've got to disagree with you slightly on that one. I don't want the relationship to be terminal any longer. You see, what I'm focusing in is doing the roll ups and keeping some of the equity in the business and then rolling that up to the next sale so that these businesses can be sold multiple times. So that terminal, that may have been the way of the past, but I think that the sellers are becoming better educated now and understanding that they can sell their business multiple times now and get a payout multiple times.
It's a great point because certainly in the deals that I've been engaged recently, all of them, they being the buyers, all of the buyers have required the seller to either directly have rollover capital or at the very least have some kind of seller or vendor financing, in which case, and a contract. And so it's like between the consulting contract, 18 to 36 months, or the seller financing and or rollover equity or all three in the most recent transaction I was involved in. It's like you're not going anywhere, so you're probably going to be involved. The challenge will be given the age of the seller, how much of decision making do they have, and B, it's like, are they genuinely going to be involved in a business to where they can bring you back in? But to be honest, you certainly always want your relationship, even though you've sold somebody's company, terminate in the sense that you're no longer representing them as selling a company, but you would certainly want them to feel nice, good about you, rather, that
Mm.
you can say, hey, can I use you as a reference, right? Because we all need references. We could have sold, it's like my company, 500 businesses, but at the end of the day, yeah, but I want to talk to the last three deals, excuse me, clients you've had so that I can find out, well, what have you done for me lately? So, it
And
does have to
how
be a
have you
good
treated
relationship.
them?
Yeah, absolutely.
They've got the flip now, but how were they treated on the way out? And you want to talk to the previous CEO as well, if they're around, to say, okay, how were you treated and how am I going to be treated in the future? Remember that saying before about from JT Fox, people how people do one thing, they will do everything. So
Yeah.
yes,
Pastor's prologue.
yes, absolutely. Now, we're just going to rewind that and we are going to bleep out Paul saying, to be honest with you. Okay, in that last
I
statement. So we will
love it.
rewind that and we'll put a big bleep out on that, I think,
I love it.
because I found it funny.
There you go.
Okay,
To be
there was
to be
something,
direct.
yes, there was something else that I found when I was reading through your stuff. And just let me read this if I could, please. Need to get them talking. The goal should never be to sell the business. That is the result.
Yes.
Could you? give us some insights as to what that's about, please.
So if you think of what a transaction is, right? You're taking an asset, transferring to somebody else, and there's liquidity. Okay.
Yep.
Money is great, but you can't eat it. Okay. So now you
Okay.
have money. All right. In other words, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to
Yep.
do with the proceeds? And also, adjunct to that, what are you going to do from this experience you've been through? What have you learned in the process? How you would apply it in this next chapter of your life? Because again, most of my clients are like me. They're in their early 60s, late 60s, or even early 70s, and they want to be connected. They want to have purpose in their life. And if they are simply treating as, wow, the culmination of my 10, 20, 30 years is I'm having this transaction, they've achieved that goal. And then it's, forgive me for saying it, but what's next?
Hmm.
If that's part of, hey, if I can sell my business, remember, like I said earlier, right? What goals can accomplish? Well, one of the financial goals is I will get this amount of liquidity, and then I'm going to use that money here and here
Yep.
and how,
Okay.
so forth. Yes, obviously to pay living expenses and so forth. So that's why I always say is it's just a result. All right.
Right.
It's really shouldn't be the goal. You should always have multiple goals.
No, that really puts it into perspective. Thank you for that. Okay. So there was prior to selling. Now we chatted earlier about it being 3 to 5 years. You should be planning. But what should you be doing in that? We discussed you've got to get your finances sorted out. Is that enough? What else should you be thinking of? And
So
should you be
you've
working
got
on?
to, yeah, you really got to have somebody else objectively look at your business. It might not be someone like you, but somebody who can work and speak with you at the strategic level and really analyze the core parts of your business. All right. So there's sales and marketing, operations and finance, go on down, HR talent, work on those three or four core areas and give you an assessment of like, the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities,
Yeah.
threats. I mean, I actually do some of that, mini scale as part of my engagement process if I want to work with somebody. But if you do that, all right, the outcome you should get is, okay, these are things I can work on. And then next is, if I work on these, it will increase the value of my business. It will increase the transferability of my business. And oh, by the way, while I'm doing this, I may actually increase my own profitability, my own money now that I'll get an immediate
Month to
result.
month. Yep. Hmm.
And I may actually enjoy my business more. Because I got to tell you, most people who come to me and they want to sell their company, there's some part of them. I just had them honest with you, right? I gotta be direct with you. They say I'm burned out, I'm this, I'm that. You're telling me a good thing when you say direct is wow, I'm tired, right? I'm a little joke. Here's what my customer profile is. There's a guy who looks a lot like the guy you're looking at. He's in his early 60s. He's been doing something a really long time, and he's tired. So you got
I
to fix
believe
this, fix your
62
business.
is the magic age, the stage.
I
62 is the one where people are selling up.
Yeah, that I think there is something about that number. It's like this little switch goes off in the back of somebody's house. I should be thinking about retirement. My friends are retiring. Sadly, we've all experienced it. Longtime friends, old classmates, they've gotten sick, they've passed away. So it's just
Yep.
we're hardwired, I think, to start thinking about that at this stage of life. And if you own a business, if you want to do something else, you got to figure out how you're going to get out.
Well, I'm sorry. I think I've missed the last 30 odd minutes of this conversation because I'm still thinking about that piece of paper
Yeah.
and what are your goals, and then taking it back to your partner and asking them. Now, my wife is going to say, just don't be in the house. Go and do something. That's going to be her goal. It's not going to be about her. It's going to be about getting me out and doing something else. Because, yeah. So that's what I was thinking of. Okay. This has been pretty good. I've really enjoyed this, Paul. I think you've given some amazing insights into the seller rather than we have so many people talking about buying and integration and all this sort of stuff. But what you've been talking about is pretty much the entire time has been the seller. What's going on in their mind? What's going on in their life? And we have to take that in. That has to be our focus. Otherwise, you rudely put it before, don't let the door hit you in the back on your way out. When I gave my interpretation of walking in to buy a business.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, this has been a great conversation. I would say that, the reality is most people who do what we do, they don't know when they get started that they're about to be going to spend 90% of their time giving unlicensed psychological advice. So you better be read up on it.
Oh, oh, I wish you hadn't have said that in exactly that terms of unlicensed. This is just being recorded, and we're all going to get prosecuted now. Or in this litigious world that we live in, we're going to be sued not just by our kids, but now by our ex-clients as well.
I know.
Ah, okay, Paul. Thank you so much. I'll give you the last word. What? How would you like to leave this today?
First of all, thank you so much. This has been fabulous. And I would encourage anybody who wants to think more deeply about this, write down that little exercise that we have there, steal it, spread the word. I'm very much an evangelist on getting business owners to think about their goals before they get to signing the engagement letter. It makes everybody's life, I'm absolutely confirmed, it makes everybody's life a lot easier.
Okay. I lied, by the way. I'm not giving you the last word. To be honest, Paul,
To be
this,
direct.
this has been quite entertaining and quite good information. Okay, now I said to be honest. Does that mean that I'm lying or I'm telling the
Yeah.
truth or the whole
We're going
lot?
to say to be
I don't
direct.
know. It's been terrific. Thank you, Paul. And all your details will be available for everybody just at the end of this clip. And I think we should definitely have another chat.
I'm really looking forward. Thanks so much. Cheers.